accidentally teased this by pressing the button beforehand. But the next thing that we're going to talk about, as far as trades are concerned, is Kyrie Irving. We have to talk about the questions around Kyrie Irving and the Dallas Mavericks potentially trading him. And the reality of the situation is that all the reports indicate that Kyrie Irving is practically an untouchable. And I think a lot of that is built out of the fact that he can't even build up his trade value right now. And because he can't build his trade value up dealing with the ACL injury, I don't think there's a clear indication as to what his trade value even is right now if you're the Dallas Mavericks organization. It would not hurt to move off of Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. Like it wouldn't hurt to fire sale around Cooper Flagg with the idea of, yes, this is going to be a rough year, but we're going to play through you. We're going to watch you develop. We're going to see you grow as a young 18-year-old in this league who is already showing signs of really starting to play better basketball after a rough start. We'll talk about that a little later on in the podcast. But really stepping into this rebuild full fledged instead of doing it kind of half assed essentially by trying to keep what lingering pieces from the Nico Harrison era around to hopefully kind of do like a mini rebuild, or I guess what a lot of organizations would deem it as a retooling, with the hopes that they'll be right back in the mix in the Western Conference within a year, maybe two. And I just don't necessarily know how smart that is to go that route when we've seen the two timelines function have its good and its bad. It's one of those things where of course you're never going to be sure until you kind of see it through. But for example, with the Golden State Warriors, you tried that by trying to bring along the young guys like Jonathan Kuminga, for example, for all of the good that it did, including them winning a championship at one point. It also has put them in a financial cap bind where they ended up having to pay Jonathan Kuminga this summer with the chance of hopefully being able to reflip him, or excuse me, being able to flip him during this NBA trade deadline before potentially having to go right back to the meeting table again this summer where he has a player option to return, or excuse me, I believe it's a team option where they either return with him still being owed another $20 million and the issues around the locker room continue, or you let him walk away for nothing. Now, they don't have the same issue as far as the timeline as Jonathan Kuminga with the Golden State Warriors because Cooper Flagg just was drafted this year as the number one overall pick. You have essentially draft control over him for at least the next 7 years on top of this year. So, full 8 seasons before you have to really worry about Cooper Flagg's future as a Dallas Maverick. But it still makes you wonder, like, can they get away with that? And honestly, should you, as the Dallas Mavericks, want to get away with the idea of still holding on to a lot of the pieces that were built around a Luka Doncic led team and Nico Harrison during his tenure, or is it time to maybe strip the well clean and try to build around Cooper Flagg and what he does best? Because Cooper Flagg and Luka Doncic are clearly not only stratosphere separate from each other in terms of talent, but they're also two totally different players as far as play style. So when it's separating yourself from Nico Harrison, you also, by proxy, are separating yourself from the Luka Doncic era in terms of the team building that was used to maximize Luka Doncic's best season as far as team success is concerned. Where 2 years ago, when you put this team together, the view was with building a defensive infrastructure around a heliocentric on ball offensive player in Luka Doncic. Cooper Flag is not that. He has a much higher upside as a defensive player, much lower floor as an offensive player, but somebody that still has a very good skill set as far as an individual shot creator, not a heliocentric one, but a connector and a play finisher. So you want to get a facilitating point guard. You want to get a defensive wing that can play next to him. You want to have, I believe that a rim running center like Derek Lively should stay on the roster between both his youth and I think his skill as a rim runner, shot blocker, and I think he's an underrated passer at the center position as well. Proved that a lot on that run to the NBA Finals as a rookie. I think that that's something that can be really, really special as a two-man game in the front court, but I do think you need more facilitation and you need more three-point shooting around Cooper Flagg. But Klay Thompson isn't getting any younger. Honestly, I think Klay Thompson, if it weren't for being with Megan the Stallion, probably wouldn't want anything to do with Dallas, Texas right now. To be honest, let's keep it real. Anthony Davis, I don't think really is a great fit next to Cooper Flagg long term. And I think honestly, with Cooper Flagg's timeline, I don't know if Anthony Davis is a great fit for the Dallas Mavericks if they're leaning into Cooper as they should. And then the question comes with Kyrie. Kyrie could be a great mentor figure for someone like Cooper. He also is somebody that, as far as we're concerned, with the most recent extension he signed, is at least going to be under contract for another season or two, which makes it where he can potentially rebuild his value and be traded at a time where he has a little bit more of a market on as far as the NBA trade deadline is concerned. Maybe next season or maybe next summer, something like that, right? But let's go ahead and read this. It says, according to ESPN's Tim Bontemps, many around the league believe that moving Davis and Irving, accumulating draft capital, and hitting the proverbial reset button would be the best course of action. Moving on from their two stars by the deadline would allow Dallas to potentially duck the tax, reset its timeline, and acquire future picks and players to restock an older roster with youth alongside their rookie sensation. NBA insider Mark Stein reported last week that the Mavericks intend to field offers for Davis but are not encouraging trade inquiries for Irving. For Finley and Riccardi, this is absolutely the right approach, and there are multiple reasons why. The biggest is the presence of Flagg. The hope in Dallas is that Flagg can become the sort of centerpiece superstar that Doncic was before he was dealt. According to ESPN insider Shams Charania, the Mavericks view Irving as an integral part of Flagg's development, saying the Mavericks value his leadership on the court, off the court, and his fit with Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg is going to need a point guard whenever he's ready to get back out on the court, and you just see right now how much this team misses Kyrie Irving. Irving's ongoing recovery is also part of the equation. He's unlikely to return until early 2026 at the earliest, and the NBA trade deadline is February 5th. Dallas won't have much, if any, time to showcase Irving and maximize his trade value. An injured Irving isn't going to bring fair market value. This is the thing, and I think this is a great way to play into it. Is that Brian Windhorst said he's a great player, full stop. But when you consider a player at his age with his injury history, you'd also be trading for the stress of an extension. That was mainly talking about where someone like Anthony Davis is concerned. Why is that important? Because essentially, it's already going to be difficult to trade Anthony Davis. That's clear. You guys should know that just simply based off of anybody who's listened to this podcast knows that I have an absolute disdain against the idea of all of these mock trades that send Anthony Davis to my Chicago Bulls. But I think a team like the Chicago Bulls even being mentioned in an Anthony Davis trade package outside of the fact that he's from Chicago is an indicator that the value that he is going to command on the trade market is not as great as you would hope for a guy who's a former champion, a guy who has all NBA defensive upside when he's healthy, a guy who's a 20-10 guy on offense. For what the value return is, we're talking about a middle of the pack at best Chicago Bulls team essentially making a trade to avoid having to pay Nikola Vucevic. And that's really it. That's more of making a desperation move. Or you have a team like the Golden State Warriors that have been mentioned that are desperately trying to get off of Jonathan Kuminga because of the implications I mentioned earlier about how they could desperately be in a bad situation this upcoming summer if if Jonathan Kuminga is still on the team because they have a team option, which would lead them to the situation of having to either decide on picking up said team option or him walking away for nothing again, which was the conversation coming into this past summer, right? So the questions around Kyrie Irving essentially are highlighted by the fact that if Anthony Davis is going to be as difficult to trade as he already is, piling on that you're also dangling out Kyrie Irving might only make things worse because the trade packages are only going to get more and more difficult to formulate because you're trying to split them between whether or not you'd rather have Kyrie Irving or have Anthony Davis based on your team's construction. And then you also have to take into account both of them have a really, really bad injury history. Hilariously enough, that same statement from Brian Windhorst, I'll read it again. He's a great player, full stop. But when you consider a player at his age with his injury history, you'd also be trading for the stress of an extension. That could honestly apply to both Irving and Anthony Davis. At least Anthony Davis, is semi-healthy and simply sitting mainly for the fact that they're trying to find a trade partner. Or at least that's what a lot of the assumption is. He is still relatively injured, but they're playing precaution. They're being very precautionary with him because the idea is still to maintain him as a potential trade piece, regardless of what Mark Cuban says about trying to keep him to play winning basketball. Because you have to be realistic. But Kyrie, currently injured with an ACL, that's going to be tough. That's a long-winded way of saying that I believe that Kyrie Irving is not going to be traded. I actually believe that he could be a good fit as that facilitating point guard next to Cooper Flagg. And although he is more of an on-ball scorer first, Irving has shown the ability in multiple situations, whether it's playing next to LeBron James or playing next to Kevin Durant, that he has the upside, the ability. He also did play off-ball next to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown instance when he was in Boston. He has played an off-ball role and has been very good at it. The clear indication is that Kyrie Irving, similar to Anthony Davis, has thrived best in his career as a number 2. Does that mean that Cooper Flagg is ready to be a number 1? No, but could it be good for his early development to have someone like Kyrie Irving next to him as a number 2 option while Cooper learns to be a number 1 in this league? Yes, and I think that statement alone is enough to keep Kyrie Irving on the Dallas Mavericks. But with that being said, you guys let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. Honestly, Kyrie, I think his trade value is not high enough right now to really consider. I think also paired with not being able to see what Kyrie Irving looks like next to Cooper Flagg hurts the situation as well, because I think if you're Cooper, you'd like to see what playing with a point guard the caliber of Kyrie Irving looks like. And I think just trading him for a bag of peanuts honestly is not maximizing this developmental year, this first real developmental year for Cooper Flagg. Because if there is a world where Kyrie Irving comes back in January or February, that still gives you a couple of months to just see what real good, competent, I would say not even just competent, elite point guard play next to an athlete, next to an Energizer Bunny type player like Cooper Flagg looks like. And I think there's a world where also Cooper Flagg could get a really good blueprint, both him and the organization, right? For what caliber of point guard, what kind of point guard makes the most sense next to him, right? I think that Kyrie Irving gives them a very good litmus test when trying to ask the question of who the long-term point guard target should be to pair next to Cooper Flagg, right? Because the same conversation that you can have about a Julius Randle being flipped for a star point guard if you're Memphis, the same questions can be asked, if you're Minnesota, the same questions you can ask about Minnesota trying to flip Julius Randle for a star point guard to put next to Anthony Edwards is the same question you could ask about the Mavericks trying to make any kind of trade acquisition to get a star point guard to put next to Cooper Flagg. So your LaMelo Ball, your Trae Young, your Darius Garland, right? Your Ja Morant. I think Kyrie Irving gives you a great litmus test, a great sample size of what caliber of point guard fits next to Cooper Flagg, so that now when you look at guys like that crop of point guards I listed, which one of those feels like the best potential point guard on the market to attack, both pairing their value and their potential fit next to the franchise player. But again, with that being said, you guys let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think the Dallas Mavericks should do with Kyrie Irving? And I don't mean just this season. Like, do you think Kyrie Irving will finish out his contract as a Dallas Maverick? Or do you think at some point before the Kyrie Irving contract ends that he will be on a different team in a different uniform, not the Dallas Mavericks? Or do you think that Dallas is going to ride this out with Kyrie and have him be the mentor that some of these reports indicate he could be, and some are indicating in Dallas Mavericks brass he should be for Dallas's superstar in Cooper Flagg? You guys let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about that.